James, and I'd like to welcome you to the latest installment of this viewer-requested video series where I'm sharing about my personal study and practice of cartomancy with playing cards. If you've been following along, if you've been keeping up, then you'll know that we've spent a bulk of this video series talking about my personal meanings that I use and work with the playing cards. So in the last installment, I talked about the number 9 and all the 9 cards, and so now we're going to be moving from the number 9 to the number 10. So in this video installment, we're going to be talking about the meanings that I have when it comes to the number 10 and all the personal associations in terms of pop culture references, things like that, with the number 10. And then I'm going to be talking about all the 10 cards one by one. If this is your first time here, if you just happen to be landing in this space in the video series, I will be leaving a link in the description box below of the previous installments in case you want to check any of those out. Or you could visit my channel page and check out the playlist there. The deck that has been assisting me throughout this video series has been the Tally-Ho playing cards, specifically number 13. And as I always say when I talk about the deck, the main reason that I work with this deck and the reason why I like it is that it was designed by Jackson Robinson of King's Wild Project. So now that I've set things up and I talked about the deck, let's now move into the next segment where we'll be talking more about the meanings and associations I have for the number 10. And here we are with all the 10 cards in the deck. And for me, one theme that immediately comes to mind with the 10s is success or failure. Another theme I associate with the 10 are endings and beginnings. The 10s can also represent things like transitions, cycles, turning points, and evolution. As always, I like to share some catchphrases or associations I have around the number 10. So some of those are the 10 Commandments, count to 10, hang 10, 10-foot pole, top 10, 10-4, 10-fold, 10-spot, 10%, 10 speed, and the 10-gallon hat. And as I always ask at this point, when it comes to the number 10, what are some of the catchphrases or associations that you have? What comes to mind for you around the number 10? Because you may be able to incorporate those into your own personal meanings for the 10 cards. And so now that I've talked about personal meanings, let's now move to looking at the individual cards, starting with the 10 of hearts. First up, we have the 10 of hearts, and my first meaning for this card is feeling successful and victorious, and that's because the suit of hearts for me can represent feelings and emotions, and the number 10 represents success. So again, feeling successful and or victorious. The 10 of hearts for me can also represent happiness, peace of mind, and a state of bliss. And like the 4 of hearts where I talked about in a previous video, the 10 of hearts can represent marriage. In addition to that, it can also represent a marriage partner. Now, if a person is not married and this card comes up, it can also represent a long-term committed relationship. Now, because hearts can represent love, this card can represent being in love with someone or something. And you would get a sense of what that particular kind of love is by surrounding cards. So again, this is being in love with someone or something. Now, one of the older meanings for the 10 of hearts is that it can represent church. And along those lines, it can represent charity and one's spiritual development. Because on a spiritual context, I liken the suit of hearts to God. And keeping with the idea of spiritual development, the 10 of hearts can represent a school and or class devoted to self-improvement, betterment, and evolvement. Remember, the number 10 can represent evolution. And some other meanings that I have for this card is that it can represent a place of amusement. It can represent entertainment, a large crowd, or an audience. I call this card the town and city card. And for me, when I think of town and city, I think of public, anything of a public nature. And keeping with the idea of amusement and entertainment and a large crowd or an audience, the Ten of Hearts can also represent a concert. That is actually one of my personal meanings for this card, a concert. And the last thing I will say about the Ten of Hearts, going with the idea of amusement and entertainment, this card can turn up to suggest a need to have some fun. And that will wrap up the Ten of Hearts. And so now we'll take a look at the next 10 in the video, the 10 of Clubs. And here we are with our second 10 card for this video, the 10 of Clubs. And for me, this particular card can represent business. In particular, for me, it can come up to represent small business. And along the business lines, commerce. The 10 of Clubs can also represent a short journey. And with the business aspect of the 10 of Clubs, it can represent a business trip or business travel. And still keeping with the business aspect of the card, because the suit of clubs can also represent things like work and business, the 10 of clubs can represent major business transactions. For example, a merger, moving of office, a change in site or location, and adding to one's business staff. Now, keeping with the idea that this can represent travel, this is the going out to the country card. Much like the 10 of hearts I talked about previously can represent the town or the city, this would represent the country. And so along those lines, and keeping with the business aspect of the card, one aspect of it on a business level can represent a manufacturing plant, something that's not in a town or a city. Now, the 10 of clubs can also represent bodies of water, and keeping with the travel aspect of the card, if we're talking about a business travel or a business trip, it can usually suggest that the travel will be over water. And keeping with the water aspect of the card, the 10 of clubs can represent things like a water pipe, a swimming pool, a washing machine, and a kitchen sink. And still playing with the water aspect of the card, the 10 of clubs can represent a boat or boating, because the suit of clubs can represent action and activity. And keeping with the boat and boating aspect of the card, it can also represent shipping. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 10 of clubs, because of all the water aspects of the card, this card can also represent the beach. And that will wrap up the 10 of clubs. And so now let's move on to the third 10 card for this video, the 10 of diamonds. And here we are with our third 10 card, the 10 of diamonds. And for me, this is the career card. And along those lines, the 10 of diamonds can represent achievement, attainment, fulfillment, and progress. Now, because the suit of diamonds represents material concerns, material matters, this card can represent success and security. And because for me the suit of diamonds can represent all things financial, this card is known as the wealth card. So it can represent wealth, freedom from financial fears, financial growth, and financial worth. And keeping with the money and finances aspect of this card, it's also known as the bank card. So much like the 4 of diamonds that I talked about in a previous video, this card can represent savings accounts, but along with that, it can represent accumulation of money, a large investment opportunity, a nest egg, pension, or a retirement fund. And much like the 10 of clubs that I talked about previously, where it could represent a boat, this particular 10 can represent an airplane. So another mode of travel. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 10 of diamonds is that it can represent a person capable of contacting the spirit world. Because much like I talked about with the suit of hearts representing God, the suit of diamonds for me on a spiritual level can represent spirit. So again, that's a person capable of contacting the spirit world. And so that will wrap up the 10 of diamonds. And now we'll turn our attention to the final 10 card, the 10 of spades. And here we are with our final 10 card for this video, the 10 of spades. And so now the 10 of spades is the most challenging card out of all the 10s. And keep in mind, that's because the suit of spades can represent things like troubles, problems, blocks, challenges, obstacles, and hurdles. So with that in mind, this is a card that can represent trouble, first and foremost. And along with the idea of trouble, it can represent worry, fear, and I have expanded that to mean the fear of failure, keeping with the theme of the 10, which can represent success or failure. So in this particular case, this would be the fear of failure. The 10 of spades can also represent suspicion. It can represent secrets and hang-ups. And so with the idea of fears and hang-ups, you would have to look at surrounding cards to gain more insight as to what the fears are about or what the hang-ups are about. Now, because the spade is a black card, one of the black suits, the 10 of spades can represent night. And it can also represent the subconscious mind. Now, much like the 10 of clubs that I talked about earlier, this is another card that can talk about bodies of water. So if you get the 10 of clubs and the 10 of spades together, and we're talking about travel, then the water aspect of the card is being emphasized. But because the suit of spades can represent things like problems and troubles, for me, the 10 of spades can also represent tears and being upset. Now, early on in this video series, I talked about the ace of clubs representing a building. So if the ace of clubs falls into a reading and this card follows after it, because of the building aspect of the ace of clubs, this card can mean the floor of a building. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 10 of spades is that an older meaning of this card is that it can mean a wheel. But the problem and the trouble aspect of the card can suggest the idea of going around in circles. And that will wrap up the 10 of spades and bring this video installment to a close. And there you have it. We talked about the number 10 and the themes and associations I have for it and the meanings I have and use for all the 10 cards. And that will bring this video installment to a close. In the next installment, we'll start looking at the face cards, starting with the jacks. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing this space with me, and I look forward to being with you again in our next video together. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.